almost here. Join active advocates for our 2026 Democratic primary election coverage, streaming live on Saturday, August 1st, beginning at 7 p.m. In partnership with East Girl and the Virgin Islands Source, we'll bring you live election results, expert analysis, and real-time discussion as votes are counted across the U.S. Virgin Islands. Our coverage will be moderated by Anthony Mardenborough, Jr., joined by panelists Emanuela Perez-Cassius, Ryan Fleegall, and Dr. Bria James. We'll be covering the races for governor and lieutenant governor, delegate to Congress, the Legislature of the Virgin Islands, the Board of Education, and the Board of Elections. Watch live on the Active Advocates, East Girl, and the Virgin Islands Source Facebook pages. One voice, one community, one future. We'll see you then.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of VI in We. I am host and political commentator Anthony Mardenborough Jr. It is a pleasure to be back. This is most likely going to be our last interview before the primary election, which is scheduled for Saturday, August 1st, 2026. And I want people to just take note that the election is very important, first of all, and secondly, I am just pleased with the amount of Democrats that actually went out and vote. In the early voting season, we actually broke record. I think it was over 7,000 individuals territory-wide. So I want to first congratulate them for coming out and showing in numbers. I think that is very, 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 very important, that we exercise our right to vote and to be a part of the process. Because, you know, as I tell people, if you're not part of the process, I don't want to see you on Facebook complaining about the issues, or I don't want to see you just protesting on the street. But I actually want to see you playing a very important part in shaping our democracy. And as we all know, this week has been very, 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 very intense. And it's been intense simply because we're getting down to the wire. On Saturday, we will find out which one of the three gubernatorial teams will make it to the general election representing the Democrats. We will find out which 7 senators from the St. Croix district and which senatorial candidates, and which 7 senatorial candidates from the St. Thomas St. John district for the Democrats will make it to the general election. And we will also find out which two members or which 2 candidates that are running for the board, out of the 3 candidates that are running for the Board of Elections from the St. Thomas St. John district will make it to the general. And lastly, we will find out who is going to be our Democratic nominee who's going to be the Democratic Party's nominee for delegate to Congress. And then you definitely can't forget Board of Education for both districts. Both districts have 8 candidates, and the people will decide which 2 from the respective districts will make it to the general election. So it's very consequential. It's important. Polls open from 7 and close at 7 on Saturday. The voting locations are posted, so please exercise your right to vote. Stay in tune with the election system so you could get all the necessary information you need. We're going to move on to interviewing our guest that is here today. This gentleman is no stranger to VI and We. He's been on the show before. I had the opportunity to interview him when he was delegate-elect to the 6th Constitutional Convention almost 2 years ago, and now he's running to serve as senator. And this is a moment for me, because I remember 2 years ago, you know, he talked about what his future might look like, and he did say Senate was in the cards at some point, but he was really mainly focused on the work of the Constitution, which is very important. So I'm glad to see have him on here. I am going to, of course, introduce him, read his bio, and then we're gonna get to dive into him, learn about his platform, why he's running for Senate as the only attorney in the St. Thomas St. John district, by the way, um, that's running for a seat in the legislature. So, with that being said, let's dive into this. So, Rudel A. Hodge Jr. is a proud Virgin Islander with passion for public service, community enrichment, and innovation. A 2013 honors graduate of Charlotte Amalie High School, he earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Philosophy, Politics, and Law from Binghamton University in 2017, where he served as treasurer and later president of the Thurgood Marshall Pre-Law Society. In 2018, Rudel joined Alpha Alpha Fraternity, Inc., embracing its values of leadership and service. He earned his Juris Doctor from Florida International University College of Law in 2022, gaining experience in intellectual property and blockchain law through legal clinics and externships. Rudel is also of Puerto Rican descent, a heritage he is proud to represent. In 2021, he was recognized as an Intellectual Property Law Institute Scholar by the Hispanic National Bar Association. Upon returning to the Virgin Islands, he founded Aya, a business rooted in local culture, and Raj GP Photography, capturing the spirit of the islands through commercial and event imagery. In November 2024, at just 29 years old, Rudel was elected to the 6th Constitutional Convention of the Virgin Islands. He is committed to youth engagement, collaboration, and drafting a constitution that reflects the aspirations of all Virgin Islanders while safeguarding their culture and rights. And a little bit more about him. He was born in St. Thomas, United States Virgin Islands, also known as Rudy or RJ, and he's an attorney, public servant, and innovator. And like you said, he's also an entrepreneur, and he is one of the candidates that is running for the 37th legislature from the St. Thomas St. John district. So I will now bring on attorney Rudel Hodge Jr. Good afternoon, sir. How are you? Hey, I am not hearing you, so I don't know if something is with your mic or... Let's see. Still not hearing you, so you might have to come back in and then see if that makes a difference. So I'm gonna give him a chance to fix that. To make sure we want to hear him. So we want to make sure his mic is working the way it's supposed to be working. But until then, like I said, we're gonna have a great conversation, and I think this is gonna be an opportunity for him to share his comments with the public. Let me see if his mic is working now. Okay. Let me see, is it working now? Let me see. Okay, talk. Let me see if I can hear you.
Mic check. Can you hear me? Mic check. Mic check.
Yes. Perfect. Yes, I can hear you. Glad we fixed that. All right. So now I want to give you the opportunity to just introduce yourself to the people who don't know you. Who's Rudel Hodge besides your bio? Tell us about some of your experiences, what shaped you as an individual, and why you decided to run for the 37th legislature.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Rudel Hodge Jr., a child of Rhode Island, born on Thomas right before Hurricane Maryland. Definitely impacted my life. Spent a sizable time in the States because I was born with a articulation disorder, and there was no services in Rhode Island that was be able to help correct that. I was sent to the States from the 1st to 8th grade. Then I returned to the territory in high school, attended Charlotte Amalie High School, and saw significant academic success. I was one of the best test takers in my class. I believe I had the second highest SAT score.
Go ahead, continue.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? Yes, you may resume.
All right, perfect.
All right, perfect.
I'm hearing an
I'm
echo.
hearing an echo. Okay, I don't know why.
Let me see.
Are you hearing me better now? Or are you still hearing an echo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me try one more time. I'm in and out.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna give him an opportunity. He's gonna come back on. But we're gonna adjust the technical difficulties as usual. But like I said, he was just talking about his experience. He's gonna come back on, and he'll dive more into the question that I posed to him earlier. So we're gonna give him a chance to come back on. I will be back with you all shortly. All right, we're back on, and hopefully the mic is working this time. Let me bring him back on. Let me see if it's working. Okay, great. So you may resume with talking about your experience and what shaped you, and then why you decided to run for the legislature.
So absolutely. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Rudel Hodge Jr. I am currently a delegate to the 6th Constitutional Convention, born and raised on the same continent before Hurricane Maryland, which shaped my life. The mass destruction kind of created a portion of my life. At the age of 6, I was sent to the States because of my articulation disorder to get better services, and I spent first to 8th grade between North Carolina and Florida. Returned to the territory in high school, attended Charlotte Mountain High School in St. Thomas, where I saw significant academic success. I was one of the best test takers in my class. I had the second highest SAT score. I won the moot court competition, so I always kind of knew I was going to be on this academic legal path. And I also was a member of the business academy at Charlotte Mountain High School, the Academy of Finance. So all those things kind of influenced me. And another very important thing I did during my high school time was being a member of the Junior Statesmen of America, going away to Stanford University for a summer, and also being a participant in Close Up, which was a civics program where they bring high school students from across the nation to DC, to New York to learn about the American political system, understanding 3 different branches of government, understanding politics in general from a high school perspective. But that created this interest in me that continued on to college, where I majored in political science, philosophy, and law at Binghamton University in upstate New York. I'm considered a public Ivy League school and like the premier public school in the New York state system. Again, saw significant academic success and was able to become a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, which is the first Black Greek letter organization. Notable members are like Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, and so on. And that also helped shape me as a servant of mankind, as a leader. And it really helped develop me into this next part of my life, where I then entered into law school. I returned to Florida, where I went to Florida International University College of Law. I got my Juris Doctorate. And then after getting my Juris Doctorate, I returned to the territory. That was in 2022. Primarily, I returned to the territory because of my aging grandmother. Unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of her children left the islands, and I was the only direct contact that was able to actually spend that period of time in the territory. And I've been taking care of her and working on the various different projects that I'm currently working on, such as the Constitutional Convention. I'm currently the board member and secretary of the Family Resource Center. I'm also a board member for Zero Tolerance. I have been a multi-time mid-court competition coach for the Charlotte Amalie High School. Have been running small businesses from photography, and then now I have been starting my solo practice and representing clients for a variety of like administrative and transactional work. Um, Outside of that, these islands very much influenced me. My travels have influenced me. I've truly been able to see a good portion of this world and see things that could possibly be replicated and adjusted for the Virgin Islands. And that's something I do hope and dream of as I enter into this race, as I try to bring true change to the Virgin Islands. As you guys seen, our elected representatives, especially in the Senate, does not really represent a wide spectrum of the thoughts and opinions of Virgin Islanders. It's usually older Virgin Islanders who are elected in these positions, especially the retirees, and that creates this balance of lack of representation, especially for youths, especially for people in our age group, people a little bit older than us. And I'm trying to start that change. I am the youngest candidate on the Democratic primary. I'm 30 years old. I'm also the only attorney on this panel of potential candidates. So I do try to offer a unique perspective in my candidacy as somebody who went to law school, who is tech savvy and looking at the new world and the digitalized world as we kind of continue, going forward with AI, machine learning, blockchain technology, quantum computing, things that the everyday Virgin Islander is not really thinking about, and I want to bring that to the forefront to Virgin Islanders.
Thank you for sharing that. And like I said, it's very important that people get to know you, because there's some people that still gonna say they don't know who you are.
Absolutely.
And it's an opportunity for you to share that with them. So I'm glad you mentioned about being the only attorney, and I really want you to dive into that, because one of the things that people have talked about constantly is the antiquated laws that we have in the territory. A lot of the laws need to be updated. They haven't been amended in the past 20, 30 years. So what do you see yourself in that process in helping to amend or even repeal some of these antiquated laws that no longer serves the purpose of the territory?
Absolutely. So the VI code is an antiquated code. It's time for a true modernization of our code to bring it up to the 21st century standards. Some parts of the code have not been updated since the 60s and the 80s. We're in 2026. So unfortunately for a lot of non-legal minds who have been elected in the position, that is not sexy work. That's not work that gets you reelected, but that is work that I would do if elected, because it's important work. We need modern laws. We need laws that have appropriate rates that are changed for inflation. I was just at the Port Authority's meeting last night, and one of the things they stated was that the reason why the rates have not increased in the last 30 something years is because the law basically stated this is a rate, and if they didn't do anything, it would have been that rate. Those are things that need to be adjusted. Those are things that need to be changed. There's a lot of areas that I'm already seeking and seeing that I would like to change. One particular area I'm looking forward to changing is our banking laws to allow access for our generation and generations above and below us to have access to like Cash App, Zelle, Coinbase, things that are currently blocked out because of our antiquated laws and those companies not being able to operate in our jurisdiction because of those antiquated laws. But yes, our VI code needs to be severely updated and modernized, and that's something that I would love to do if elected to the Senate with the assistance of my colleagues, because as a senator, it's a group project, right? You cannot just do it by yourself. You need to get the support of your colleagues, and that's something I hope to achieve, so we can actually have a modernized Virgin Islands, especially with the influx of money that's going to come into the territory. It's time for the Virgin Islands Code to actually address the modern needs of modern day Virgin Islanders.
Thank you for that, because you're right. That's the work that is not done on camera. That's the work that is done behind the scenes, and actually working with your staff and your colleagues to see, okay, what laws can we actually tackle that needs to be improved, that could immediately make positive impacts into the lives of Virgin Islanders. So, diving into the issues, one of the issues that Virgin Islanders continue to face, and your district deals with it more than our district, which is energy. Um, to be honest, we just lost power. The St. Croix district just lost power last night, at least
Mhm.
twice. And St. Thomas is an ongoing rotational outage. Power is always out. So, what role do you see yourself playing as a senator to work with whoever becomes the next governor and lieutenant governor, and working with WAPA to try to address this energy crisis that Virgin Islanders are facing?
Yeah. So, one, I'm sorry, guys, when the part went out for you guys. I know how annoying that is, especially on the St. Thomas St. John district. Um,
Mm,
the modern reality is we need energy to live our modern lives. It's not like the olden days where it was a luxury. It's actually a necessity at this point, right? And I think I look at WAPA, I look at the situation as this. WAPA was created by law in 1969, right?
mm,
Now, I like to compare WAPA to a 1969 Cadillac that the Virgin Islands has been maintaining and trying to keep running, but it's time for a new car. It's time for a new vehicle. It's time to stop pouring money into this old field project and actually move on to what's next. Two, WAPA is a semi-autonomous company, right? That meaning that the government has some type of ownership and decision making, but it's supposed to operate as a company, right? That means it's operating for profit. I don't think a for-profit company in the Virgin Islands makes sense for energy, especially because of our unique needs. We need to be run like other rural areas in the United States where they do cooperative, where the ratepayers are actually the stakeholders and co-owners of the entity, right?
mm.
That's something I will strive to see succeed. I have other suggestions or alterations. For example, on my website, electrudi.com. Again, that's electrudi.com. I talk about my plan or my proposed plan to uh, bifractional WAPA because right now WAPA has a monopoly on both energy generation and energy transmission. I will allow them to keep their monopoly over energy transmission, but I'll allow to remove that monopoly on energy production because then we could open up opportunities for other individuals to produce energy and then be sold through those transmission lines. That's one solution that I'm offering, and I hope that my colleagues, if and when I'm elected, are open to those solutions. In terms of working with the governor and the other stakeholders, is really figuring out how can we move forward from this failure, in my opinion, and actually have it is true modern necessity in the Virgin Islands because we have a serious problem in the terms of we have the highest utility and then we have very bad service. If we had high utility costs and good service, then it would be patient. But because we have both, we have to figure out how we could one either reduce our utility costs and and improve our service, and so we can actually have a better quality of life in the Virgin Islands.
Thank you for sharing that because that is a reality of many, and we really need to figure out a way to address this problem because this is part of one of the many reasons why new businesses are not growing in the territory or coming because the
Mm-hmm.
reliability of power is just, nobody wants to take that kind of risk. Shifting
Absolutely.
gears to another risk that's causing people to leave the territory in flux, and it's regarding healthcare.
Mm.
So, healthcare is another issue I think all Virgin Islanders would prioritize as number one. So, what are your thoughts in terms of what solutions you could see yourself working or trying to address as a senator to improve healthcare in the territory?
So I think healthcare is a multifaceted issue. We are basically at a point in our healthcare systems where it's more advantageous to leave Ireland to get the help that you need because we lack, fundamental or the ability to attract specialists to actually address the needs of our territory, right? Um, So that creates a situation where the people that are actually using the healthcare in the territory are actually our most disadvantaged people in the territory, the ones that do not have the means to leave the territory for healthcare. So they're also the ones who cannot pay. And basically, because our law states that you cannot refuse healthcare, we are fundamentally having universal healthcare without universal healthcare being stated. And because there's no money being poured into the system, we have poor universal healthcare, right? So I think I would tackle it, and this is again, as a center, you have to tackle it with your colleagues' help, right? It's tackling it from multifaceted ways, right? One, shoring up our healthcare systems where they have sufficient amount of money to treat the patients that are currently in the system and actually attract some of the individuals who have escaped our system to leave the island, right? Two, create a pipeline of healthcare professionals in the territory. We have a unique opportunity to position UVI as the only HBCU medical school in the Caribbean, where you still will be able to get American credentials and be able to study in the Caribbean. If that's something that we can achieve and be able to do, that's something I will push for, so we can have a pipeline of doctors trained in the U.S. Virgin Islands and then potentially stay in the U.S. Virgin Islands because they are trained in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We also be able to attract talent from other Caribbean regions, right, and islands, from the Dominican Republic, from Puerto Rico, from St. Lucia, Grenada, and be able to create a pipeline of medical professionals in the Virgin Islands that will be able to relieve and address some of the concerns, right? And then additionally is also creating stronger partnerships with the places that Virgin Islanders are already visiting for the healthcare, right? And trying to create some type of fee sharing agreement where they start the service in the Virgin Islands, and then through these channels they go to the ones in the States. So some money stays within the territory because we are losing much of our medical resources by our citizens leaving the territory to get assistance outside the territory.
Thank you for sharing that, and I know I'm glad you said this issue is multifaceted because I definitely see our next delegate to Congress tackling this from the federal perspective in terms of how we could address this financial crisis in terms of dealing with our healthcare and what resources or legislation that could be addressed to include the Virgin Islands in some of these um, you know legislations that currently exist in terms of healthcare and funding and all those different things. So I think that is something that the 37th legislature should explore with the next delegate to Congress in terms of getting that addressed. Moving along, another issue that people are facing right now is the recovery. People feel like the recovery is moving too slow. They feel it's not a lot of the projects that were announced years ago still hasn't been completed. So what type of oversight do you see yourself having as a senator in ensuring that the next administration completes the projects that are obligated with the federal funds?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it boils down to accountability, right? And increasing the frequency that the legislatures actually review the status of these developments. Right now, usually it comes forward during budget season, which is once a year. That needs to actually happen maybe quarterly, where there's quarterly updates on the progress and what obstacles are happening so we can address them during those times versus waiting once a year during budget season when they're asking for more money or stating the issues. Our recovery has been slowed, but I think we have to uh, temper that by also understanding that the Virgin Islands faced two unique circumstances. We had Irma Maria, two Category 5 hurricanes that decimated St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix. So all of our islands have been damaged by those hurricanes. And then shortly after, within 3 years, we had COVID, right? And COVID created a very different world than what we expected after Irma Maria. The price of goods have went up, the price of labor has gone up, the price of contracting has gone up. So all of those quotes that was in process, right, and allocated no longer are relevant to this day and age. And guess what? Inflation is still rising. the price of yesterday's goods and today's goods are not the same prices, right? So those things have caused the situation, but we need to figure out how we can move faster and more efficiently and actually start these projects so we actually are locking in the costs that are quoted now versus the cost of the future years.
Thank you for sharing that. And another issue that is causing individuals to question the safety of this territory, as you know, is crime and gun violence. Um, and it's gotten really bad that some data is projecting that we might be on target to having 50, hopefully not,
Hopefully.
murder cases,
Yes.
this year. So what are your thoughts or plans in terms of working with your colleagues and, like I said, the next administration to get down on this crime and gun violence that's plaguing our communities, and what role do you see? So because most of it is younger individuals that are committing these crimes and acts. So it's like a two-part question. What role do you see yourself playing in working with the administration in trying to curb down on crime, and how do you think we could get young people to steer away from crime?
Yes, excellent question. So, gun violence and crime is something that, you know, is a reality in my life. Today makes 10 years to the day that my prom date was murdered because of
Wow.
gun violence, right? So, if elected, I think it's, again, crime is a multifaceted issue, right? Crime
Mm,
is an issue of convenience. I don't have it, or just circumstantial, right? I think what the Virgin Islands has lost in the post Irma Maria, post COVID years is third spaces for youths, right? Community centers, right? Renewed focus on education, especially knowing that the education quality during COVID, right, was not the same educational quality before COVID, right? There's a lot
right.
of students who, you know, before the average reading level, was the eighth grade level, and right now we might be averaging at the sixth or fifth grade level, right? Those are
Mhm.
things that can be addressed with properly written legislation, especially supporting, you know, bringing back our community centers, bringing back third spaces, having
Mm,
stable electricity that creates business opportunities that can hire some of these youths so they don't have to resort to violence or crime to make ends meet or, do things in their lives, right? So
mhm.
again, it comes from it has to be approached, from multiple different angles. I think one case study that I think the Virgin Islands needs to be paying very attention to is what Baltimore has done, the mayor of Baltimore.
Mhm.
I think his name is Byron Scott, if I'm not mistaken, and how
Mhm.
he was able to turn around Baltimore from having some of the highest murder rates in the United States by funding community organizations, funding the nonprofits that actually goes in the community and create the situation that actually builds a community that actually doesn't want to commit crime. And I think that's something that the Virgin Islands can look at and implement some of the better ideas and relevant ideas to the Virgin Islands.
Thank you for that. And I'm an educator, so I'm all on board with supporting our nonprofits and supporting our teachers, which leads me to my next question in regards to education. You know, education, and you alluded to it, where COVID, it was a total type of different education that was being done.
Mm-hmm.
And recent scores published by Kids Count has revealed that our students are doing moderately okay in English, but are doing really bad in mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see yourself playing with the department to give them the necessary support, oversight, and assistance to help them get our students to where they need to be, as in your role as a senator? Of course, we understand the executive branch is who executes, but what role do you see yourself playing in helping the Department of Education bridge that gap of students struggling? And I think you mentioned community centers, but I want you to expand more in terms of what else do you think could be done to help our students academically?
Yeah, so definitely. outside of community centers or in conjunction with community centers is funding after school programs and extra help programs to gain and allow Virgin Islanders or use the Virgin Islands to gain those missing steps, because math is one of those subjects where if you lose one part of it, everything else gets confusing as you go on, right? So going back and figuring out where we lost them, right? And then developing a plan in an after school program to actually get them up to the levels that they need to be, and also re and also reintroduce a level of community in terms of giving the parents the tools necessary to actually assist the child in achieving the scores that they need, whether that might be additional training for the parents, so they can use some of their non-school hours to sharpen those skills, right? And be able to actually achieve the results that they want, because math is a very important subject. People say and people understand that math is a language of God, and if you don't have math skills, you lose a lot of access in this world. So it's very important that we collectively figure out solutions. I think my solution will again be heavily funded after school programs that will be able to use those community centers to give those additional assistance to those students who need the additional help in math, and also creating workshops, educational programs that would assist parents with teaching their children the skills necessary in non-school hours.
Thank you for that. Economic development. And the reason why I bring this up is because one of the primary roles of a senator is to draft and pass revenue generating measures. So, what are some of your ideas in terms of economic development that you think can propel the Virgin Islands to becoming more self sustainable financially?
Yeah, so I have a couple measures. One is we have to move forward with our cannabis regulation, right?
Mhm.
The system that we currently have clearly is not working, and we might need to readdress the law from the legislative branch, because we have not seen any process or progress or true process or progress to get an actual regulation in the Virgin Islands for a past law since 2020, right? I believe cannabis is one of the solutions to diversify the Virgin Islands economy, especially from the byproducts of cannabis, especially hemp. There's something called hempcrete, which is basically a building material that could use it as an insulator that is mildew resistant, hurricane resistant, earthquake resistant, and that could be a product that the Virgin Islands produce and export every day and every week. Probably tropical bring down goods to the Virgin Islands, but they never leave with things on those ships. Those are something that we can start being able to produce locally in the Virgin Islands, having a hempcrete plant, being able to process the byproduct of the cannabis plant, create hempcrete, and then ship it off to the States for building, and also use it for building in the Virgin Islands. Uh, Besides that, we have to refocus on our blue economy. We need to make a better deal with our BVI partners so we could get back some of that lost revenues in our charter businesses. All right. We also have to think about creative solutions to take advantage of the Jones Act. We are exempt from the Jones Act, which is a federal law that basically states that if a ship comes to a U.S. port, in order to offload their product, it has to be a U.S. ship and U.S. employees, right? So if a ship comes from, let's say, China and goes to Puerto Rico, they will have to remove all the cargo and put it on an American ship and get American workers to move that cargo off to Puerto Rico. The Virgin Islands is exempt from that law. So we can use that benefit to actually create manufacturing jobs so they could be made in America, right? I think St. Croix will actually be a prime spot for that because of the size, right? And also being a using it as a transplant center, or not transplant, but trans uh, transshipment center, getting goods moved across the Caribbean region. It was at one point St. Louis was the capital of the New World, and that's something that we can possibly go back to as a collective Virgin Islands with smart legislation and smart partnerships.
Thank you for that because you legit just answered my next question, which was relation to transshipment. And how we could get back into trading with our regional and even international partners at some point. So I want to talk about roads and transportation, and I just have to clarify this point because I need people to understand senators do not fix roads. That's not their job. That is the executive branch. They appropriate funding to get the roads fixed. So that's what I want. And I think a lot of times, and I think part of why so many people are actually taking part in voting is because one, we're going to get a new governor no matter what. But two, people I think are just fed up and they want to see the oversight. So as a senator, that's one of your prime responsibilities is providing oversight to these agencies. And you mentioned about accountability, which is very, very important. But beyond oversight, if you were asked to be a chair, what is two committees do you're thinking that you might like to serve as chair of or serve on, and why?
So right now I'm really focused on one right now, which is rules and judiciary because of my legal background.
Mhm.
About again, healthcare is very important to me, especially because of my grandmother's story. So that's another committee that I also would be interested in being a part of.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I ask these questions because I think senators need to at least know at least one, or a candidate need to know at least about one committee that they're interested in, at least one, because you can't accomplish everything in 2 years realistically. That's just not enough time. However, you could at least tackle two of the things that you said you're going to tackle and get
Hmm.
those things done.
No,
And so I asked the question because go ahead.
no, but I know you asked the question you asked. You started off with talking about roles and accountability, and then you asked
Mhm.
me about
Yeah,
chair. I do want to talk about that. Um,
sure.
Going into accountability, I think one of the things that the Virgin Islands is severely lacking is data, right? Which is
Fact.
public available data that showcases when these roads are expected to be fixed, how often they're being fixed, why they're being fixed, because of the reasons that causing these damages, right? And something I'm looking forward to seeing is a quote unquote like digital twin of the Virgin Islands that really outlines the areas of concern, right? Can showcase, let's say, for example, I live in the estate Thomas and St. Thomas, which is right at the bottom of Moon Hill, right? We
Yeah.
are fundamentally the secondary route for a lot of these trucks. If the main route is closed, those roads have not been repaired properly since I was born, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and I think that things like that should be documented to showcase that, hey, we have these public roads and we have not maintained them in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, whatever the case may be. And then we could kind of be like, okay, now we could prioritize the places that have not seen surface from the government that we are taxpaying um, participants in, right? And we're able to have that data, you can make more informed decisions and understand what is causing the issues, which vendors who are fixing roads are actually doing a good job, which vendors are not doing the best job, which roles and might need to have, instead of just being fixed, we might need to think about, hey, we also might need to figure out how we are moving water through this area because we have a lot of issues with water staying in this area that's creating potholes. So let's create actually the solution to
Mhm.
address not only the damage, but also the cause of the damage, right? And with that data driven mindset as a legislature, we can actually have effective and efficient results for Virgin Islanders.
Thank you for that because that I tell people that about that all the time as I serve on various boards across the territory, and one of the things that we all agree on is data. We don't track
We don't track.
information. And that and like I tell people this all the time, having good data drives good policy. So that is very, very important. And if you're just drafting policy and not having the evidence and information necessary to make the best policy, that's what we're happening right now. We have senators that are drafting policies, not having the data and the information, and then few months later, not even years, but few months later, we have to go back and fix it because it wasn't done right in the first place.
Mhm.
Which leads me to another topic: agriculture. People have been talking about agriculture. But what is something you see yourself as a senator working with your colleagues to try to address agriculture in the territory? Because we're not self-reliant. We import almost everything. So, if not everything. So, what are your thoughts in terms of agriculture and what ways you can see yourself playing a role in trying to address the agricultural crisis that we're facing in the territory?
Yeah, no, agriculture is very important. We have to get to a point that we reduce our reliance on importation of goods. I think the typically reported numbers, we import like 98% of our groceries, right?
Hmm.
Uh, we need to shift that from 98 to 90 and 10 to 80-20 to 70-30 and so on and so forth. And I think the best way to go about it is supporting our local farmers. Right now, I believe budgeted for agriculture is about $3 million. That needs to be increased in our budget. And I think one of the smart solutions is actually creating a farm to school food program where farmers are selling the produce to our schools, right? So now there's a cynical or cyclical secular nature of farmers grow the food goes gets sold to the schools then produce the lunches and meals for the children are fed, and then that continues that grow those children then become adults, those adults become workers and so forth and so on, right? And that also creates the incentive of having a guaranteed buyer, because that's one of the biggest obstacles with farming is the uncertainty of what will happen to your crop, because it's a time sensitive nature of growing, right? Produce doesn't last forever, right? They're perishable. But if we
Yeah.
have the programs in place where you know there are farmers that are assigned specific volume amounts to produce certain foods for our schools, right? That would definitely help produce more agriculture in the Virgin Islands.
Thank you for that. And so, which leads me to a follow up. Some schools are exploring doing having their own farms. So, would you support giving more funding in terms of giving it to the schools so that the students can continue developing and growing their farms? Because I think that is a great way to also address that in having the children grow their own food and seeing that, okay, I grew peppers, I grew tomatoes, I grew lettuce, and they're actually eating those um, vegetables that they're growing or fruits. So I think that's something you could potentially explore as well. What is an issue that you think Virgin Islanders are facing that we did not discuss, and what solution do you have in mind in terms of addressing it?
I think Virgin Islanders are not thinking about our declining birth rates, right? We have a declining birth rate in the Virgin Islands, especially after COVID. And
Yes.
if you know anything about history, when a society has a declining birth rate, that usually leads is one of the tall tale signs of a collapse of a society, right? So we have to figure out what is causing Virgin Islanders to not have their children or not have children in the Virgin Islands, what is forcing Virgin Islands to leave the territory if they have children or before they're having children. And we have to really figure that out because that's very important. We need youths to replace the elders, right? We can already see in our current demographics that we already have a mostly elder leaning population, and that then creates a lack of workers, lack of resources, lack of innovation, and that those are things that Virgin Islanders need to pay attention to and figuring out how can we incentivize Virgin Islanders to actually create more Virgin Islanders in the Virgin Islands.
Yes. Thank you for that, and that's important. Now, housing. That's
Mm-hmm.
another issue. And a lot of people want to come back home, but come back to where? So to talk to us about housing and what ideas you have in terms of addressing housing, because you're a millennial, I'm a Gen Z, and a lot of us want to come back home. But the issue we have is coming back home to stay where? Coming back home to live where? So what are your ideas and thoughts about housing and how we could get Virgin Islanders to come back home and be a part of this rebuilding process that the Virgin Islands is going through currently?
Yeah, housing is super important in Virgin Islands because we have a finite stock of housing, right? And
Mhm.
housing is very, very expensive to the typical Virgin Islander, right? Um,
Mhm.
so one of my overarching solutions to housing is combined with another idea. We have to look at the current government holding of assets in terms of land, all right, and then have strategic partnerships to actually develop those lands to actually have housing for our next generation and generations to come and generations that already exist, right? That is very important. There's a lot of, in my opinion, mismanaged properties in the Virgin Islands that's owned by the government. Case in point, I could talk more close to St. Thomas because that's the district I live on. There is
Mhm.
a abandoned mental facility in uh, hospital ground around the field that could be redeveloped into, you know, some type of housing for Virgin Islanders, right? So things of that nature is looking at the stock that the government has and then having creative partnerships. For example, I'm very proud of 340 North, which is a development that's going to be
Mhm.
created in St. Thomas. And I would like to see something similar on all three islands, on St. John, on Water Island, on St. Croix, to actually have partnerships where we are working with developers to actually create the housing that is necessary for Virgin Islanders. And specifically going back to my first point of looking at that stock of assets that the government owns and then leveraging that to create more housing. We definitely need to figure out more housing for our teachers, nurses, and doctors in the territory, especially if we could give them a discounted rate or prorated rate that they could be able to live and work in the Virgin Islands without being pushed out by the pressures of being one of the most expensive jurisdictions in the United States.
Thank you for that. Now, some of the candidates running, they don't have much government experience. Some do, including yourself. You currently serve as one of the delegates on the Sixth Constitutional Convention. So, share with us what that experience has been like so far, and what skills do you see yourself translating into serving as a senator if given the opportunity to serve?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the experience as a delegate to the Sixth Constitutional Convention has been a very rewarding, eye-opening experience. As you know, I'm one of the younger delegates. I'm the youngest male delegate. There are about two other delegates that's under the age of 35, and then the vast majority of our delegates are above the age of 70. So it's basically I call it the group project where I'm working with my grandparents, friends, and foes.
Mhm.
It's very interesting in that aspect. Um, One thing you learn in this position is, Robert Rules of Order, which is the way that most meetings are governed in the Virgin Islands. So I have I've been developing that skill set as a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I have already started developing that skill set because that's how we ran our meetings during college and during our conventions. Um,
Mhm.
but it's been a true understanding of some of the people politicking and just administrative politics of the Virgin Islands government. I was in a position where, because of miscommunication with transferring of our funds, we was basically a convention that was not funded for months, and he was doing the community work without being paid, right? Which is a common reality in Virgin Islands, where a lot of vendors are currently seeing that they're not paid by government. And one of the solutions I am currently thinking about or would like to implement if I want elected with my colleagues is having some type of digital dashboard that is accessible by the public to actually see how long vendors have not been paid, and we able to actually actualize, okay, we have a lot of vendors in these 90-day thing, in the 90-day haven't been paid in 90 days. How can we address this in the most effective and efficient way with the availability of funds? um, One thing the Virgin Islands does, in my opinion, a disservice is our enforcement of our laws and a collection of funds, and we need to do a better job of actually enforcing our laws to get the funds necessary to run government. Right? The government is not free. All right, the services provided by government cannot always be free. It has to have some type of funding source, and if we are not doing our job as a legislative branch, as an executive branch, as a judicial branch to collect the funds necessary to operate the Virgin Islands, we are doing ourselves a disservice.
Thank you for that. I want to just follow up because you talked about having some type of dashboard in terms of people seeing how long vendors are not being paid. You know, some would say we have the open finance dashboard already. So are you saying that we create a new dashboard, or are you saying that you would give recommendations to finance or management and budget to add a section where or stipulate legislation where it requires a section of the dashboard to include vendors who haven't been paid and how long? So that would be my follow-up to that question.
So yes, we do have some public dashboards. They are very non-user friendly currently. That's something that has to be addressed, right? And this is why I will be suggesting or introducing legislation that have specific parameters that these dashboards have to produce, and especially making them user friendly and easy to understand and easily accessible, right? If something, just because there is a link on a website that's, between four links, doesn't make it public, doesn't make it accessible, right? It has to be something that is very easily accessible for Virgin Islanders to see and to have that accountability there, right? A lot of times our publicness is hidden in a way where it's not truly public accessible. It's public because it's some place that you can potentially access if you know that specific link or where to find that information. I want things to be something that I want those dashboards to be a place that any Virgin Islander with minimum technical skills can be like 2 clicks, get to this information, right? And that goes also another point where we need to modernize our government, especially our websites. It infuriates me how often you will go to a government website and you will click a link and it sends you nowhere or it's broken, right? Those things need to be addressed because we are in a digital age. Our websites need to work. They need to be functional. They need to be efficient and effective for the people of Virgin Islands.
Yes, which leads me to this point before we're gonna play your video, and then I'll give you the opportunity to close after. Which leads me to my point where enforcement is important because in the 35th, I think it was 35th legislature, they passed the IDEA Act. The IDEA thing was proposed by former Senator Carrion in relation to basically what you're talking about. Websites for the government being digitized and improved, accessible, and all of those different things. So which leads to your earlier point about enforcement. A lot of times things are not enforced because oversight is not monitored. And you're not really holding them and saying, okay, what's going on with the IDEA Act? Why hasn't your agency enforced this? Prime example, we have a whole brew of information technology. Why is certain agencies going through hacks where we have a whole secured agency that is responsible for managing information technology? So again, it's about enforcement and, like you said earlier, collaboration and partnerships that plays a role in getting these things done. But I do understand and agree that these dashboards or platforms need to be more accessible and easier to get to, instead of having all of these bridges and barriers and gaps that makes the process of getting that information more difficult for individuals to do. So with that being said, we're going to play your video, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to close, ask you one more question, and then we'll close, and you'll get that chance to make your final call to the people before Saturday's election.
Thank you. I'm Rudel Hodge Jr., Esquire, born and raised right here in the Virgin Islands. I'm running for the 37th legislature because I believe the Virgin Islands deserves leadership that combines fresh ideas with a deep respect for our home.
We create things,
we see issues, but we don't create plans and solutions for those issues. I want to solve some of the core issues. I want to solve WAPA. I want to solve our healthcare crisis. I want to solve
the reason that we have
brain drain. I want to create a better Virgin Islands for Virgin Islands because Virgin Islands is my home. Every year, I watch more of us get priced out, pushed out, forced to leave the Virgin Islands just to build a better life.
My platform is preservation, preserving the Virgin Islands that we collectively want.
Respect.
We need to respect our elders. We need to respect our vendors. We need to respect our island itself by recycling. Opportunity. Right now, the Virgin Islands is facing immense brain drain,
and we need to create opportunity for Virgin Islands to stay and live and thrive. Preparation. We have to prepare for the new world. This world is getting digitalized. This world is becoming blockchain, crypto, tech-focused. And if the Virgin Islands doesn't focus on those things,
we're going to be left behind even more.
With the right policy, the right tools, and a leader committed to the future of the Virgin Islands, we can prop up our communities to keep home. I am Rudel Hodge Jr. and this is the future.
All right, and now we're back. So my last question to you is, what is one thing do you want people to take away from this discussion we had today in terms of your candidacy, and then make your final call to the people before August 1st?
Yeah, so I think one thing I would like this conversation, or people who are viewing this conversation, to take away is my passion for the Virgin Islands and my expertise and technical skills that can actually affect and change the Virgin Islands. Again, I am the youngest person in this race. I am also the only attorney. I am coming home to serve the Virgin Islands because I want to keep the Virgin Islands home. I often compare the Virgin Islands to New York. We are the New York of the Caribbean. We have a very similar structure where New York has their boroughs. There's Manhattan, there's the Bronx, there's Queens, there's Staten Island, there's Brooklyn. The Virgin Islands has St. Thomas, St. Croix, Water Island, St. John. It's kind of very similar. And if you look at the history of New York, there was a time that the same issues that's affecting the Virgin Islands happened in New York, and then there was a shift. There was a change. Money came in, and the people were displaced. New York was never the same. I want to use that case study and make sure the Virgin Islands is preserved in the way that Virgin Islanders collectively want. That's one of my platforms, going back to prop, because I want to prop up the Virgin Islands because we have fallen down, and it's time to get back up. This is what I call the Virgin Islands Renaissance, which is going to be the revival of the modern day beautiful Virgin Islands.
Thank you. And I want to just again thank you for coming on, and I wish you good luck in the primary election that is happening on Saturday. And we will again see if the Democrats give you the opportunity to represent them in the general election. Like I said, thank you for coming on, and I wish you the best and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I want to just again thank Attorney Rudel Hodge for coming on the show via and we. Like I said, he's most likely going to be the last candidate we interview before the general election. Before the primary election. And I want to just thank him for coming on and being a part of the show, and just definitely sharing his ideas and thoughts. Sure, go ahead. One more.
Yeah, so sorry, I misunderstood your original question. I thought it was going to be answer the first question and then give me my time to give my last pitch.
Go ahead and do your last pitch.
Yes. So again, thank you guys for viewing this. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this program via we. This is my second time. I hope to be on many more times in the near future. My name is Rudel Hodge Jr. I am number 12 on the Democratic primary for the St. Thomas St. John district for the position of a legislature of the Virgin Islands. I am the youngest candidate on the primary ballot. I'm also the only attorney that's on the ballot. I have come home to serve the people of the Virgin Islands because the Virgin Islands is home. and I want to keep the Virgin Islands as home for as long as I can. My platform is based on PROP, which is preservation, preserving the Virgin Islands that we collectively want, respecting our elders, respecting our youths, respecting our island. O, for opportunity, because we need to create opportunity for Virgin Islanders to live and strive in our home. And P, preparation, to prepare the Virgin Islands for the future that is coming. There's AI, blockchain, crypto, quantum computing, things that the everyday Virgin Islander does not have on their radar, that is creating global movement. And the Virgin Islands is no longer just a couple of rocks in the ocean. We are part of a global world. That said, please go out to vote August 1st, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the Democratic primary. I am Rudel Hodge Jr., number 12 on the ballot. I am the last name on the ballot, so we started from the bottom up because change comes from the bottom. Have a wonderful day, and God bless the Virgin Islands.
Thank you. And like I said, that was a great closing. I want to again just thank the people of Virgin Islands for continuing to support VNW and to, of course, support active advocates. Again, I want to just thank everyone for helping us grow. Your support, we have grown from about 130 to now over 350 followers. So I want to just thank you and for supporting me and supporting the team. But I would be remiss to not mention, like what Rudel lastly said, voting. Please, Democrats, go out and vote on August 1st. The polls, I believe the polls open from 7 to 7. It usually opens for 12 hours. Go to your different sites, register to vote, be a part of the process. You can catch active advocates on the road. We will be on the road on election day. We will be on the road on St. Croix. I will be joined by two young individuals, Nakai Theodore and Hope Samuel, who is going to be my interviewers, and they're going to get to engage with the candidates and supporters on St. Croix, along with Ms. Diana Diaz from VI Source. And on St. Thomas, St. John, we're going to be having Ms. Anata Pancham and Gabrielle Kouard going around St. Thomas and St. John, asking questions to the candidates and supporters on election day. So catch us around 8:30 to about 12 this Saturday on the road asking questions. And then, of course, do not forget to tune in at 7 p.m. right here on Active Advocates VI on East Kyoto and the Virgin Islands Source, as we will be providing live to date election results and coverage for all of the races: governor, lieutenant governor, delegate to Congress, Board of Education, Board of Elections, Legislature of the Virgin Islands. So please tune in, watch. We go live at 7 p.m. and we'll be live until we get the final unofficial results of the evening. So please tune in, watch, support, and we look forward to seeing you after. Most likely, like I said, this is going to be the last candidate interview until before the primary. So we look forward to engaging with you after the primary and getting the next set of individuals to come on, which will be Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody, in anticipation for the general election in November. Again, this is your host and political commentator, Anthony Mardenborough Jr. of VNW. My team and I thank you, and we will see you next time on the show.
Almost here. Join Active Advocates for our 2026 Democratic primary election coverage, streaming live on Saturday, August 1st, beginning at 7 p.m. In partnership with East Girl and the Virgin Islands Source, we'll bring you live election results, expert analysis, and real-time discussion as votes are counted across the U.S. Virgin Islands. Our coverage will be moderated by Anthony Mardenborough, Jr., joined by panelists Emanuela Perez-Cassius, Brian Flegall, and Dr. Bria James. We'll be covering the races for governor and lieutenant governor, delegate to Congress, the Legislature of the Virgin Islands, the Board of Education, and the Board of Elections. Watch live on the Active Advocates, East Girl, and the Virgin Islands Source Facebook pages. One voice, one community, one future. We'll see you then.